Hello, and welcome back to the Art Preesh podcast. I'm Tucker, and I have a friend here with me. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Faith.
That is Faith. You might have noticed that the person who just spoke is not Zane and also a woman. See, lest anyone say we are not progressive here at the Art Preesh podcast. Woman on the show. First guest is a woman.
I don't love being a diversity hire, but I will take it.
Yeah. See, we're all very happy about it. No, really, we were planning on having Faith on as our first guest for a while. Unfortunately, Zane could not make it to the recording today. You know, who would have thought? Grown man with a family. He's got responsibilities outside his silly little podcast. But that means that although we're sad that he's not here, Faith has been upgraded to guest host. Thank you for being here, Faith.
Thank you. It's an honor. I would just like to say that I do think Zane and I have a lot of similarities. So hopefully it feels exactly the same to you as when you normally host with Zane.
Okay. That's a very comforting idea because that's what I was thinking is like, how's it going to go? How's the conversation going to be different? But I think we'll be fine. Before we go any further, because we will get distracted, I just want to restate why we're here. This is the Art Preesh podcast, where we are trying to practice the spiritual discipline of art appreciation. We want to intake art, which we believe is a gift from God, and process it, not just like, hey, this looks cool, and we like the cinematography or whatever. We also want to filter art through the lens of our Christian faith and ask, what can this tell us about the human condition, about God, maybe even the gospel? That's kind of our aim here at the show. And if you like that idea and you'd like to support, thanks for being here, first of all, for listening. Please check out the link tree in the description. Follow us on socials. Give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It means the most. You can even email us and suggest a piece of art for us to talk about. That address is tsdoaa2025@gmail.com. Send us a movie, an album, a painting. We'll probably check it out and talk about it in a later episode. We'll try. Someday we'll talk about more than just movies. Anyway, thank you for being patient and letting me do my spiel, Faith. Are you ready to jump in?
I'm so ready.
Okay, I'm excited. So first of all, we're going to just kind of get to know you a little bit. And, obviously, we don't have a ton of people listening, but it is going out on the internet, so you can say as much or as little as you want. So who are you, Faith? Tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do?
My name is Faith Olson. I am a worship pastor. I live in Illinois in the Chicagoland area, which I always love saying Chicagoland because it feels like very mystical. It's just a nice way of saying it. But I love it. And I love music. I love movies. I love books. I love paintings. I just showed Tucker a picture of a new painting I got in my house. All those things are important, and I love talking about them with my friends. So I'm just so thankful to be able to do this.
Yeah. I did not know it was a painting. You guys got to know what it is. It's from Seinfeld. It's Elaine talking to the soup Nazi, and she just said it's a painting. I didn't know it was a painting.
It is a painting. To be fair, I did not give you a good view of it, but I ordered it on Etsy because we should support small artists. I don't really know if Etsy counts as small artists, but it does to me. It's a painting. It's beautiful. It's like a still from the show, but they got so many of the details right. Like there's a letterboard in the back of the shop with all of the different soups on it, and they took the time in the little teeny tiny paintbrush to write out mulligatawny and different things like that on this
awesome.
letterboard. So it's really cool. It's special.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So speaking of friends, how do you know myself and Zane? We haven't talked about my origin story with Zane, but we're going to talk about our origin story with you.
Sure, that's fine. You guys are my friends. I met Zane when I was in high school. I was probably 15, 16. And he was working at a church that I was sort of interning at, pseudo-interning, just following around my youth pastor. And then I met Tucker when I was 17. And he was doing a legitimate internship. And that's how I met.
Yeah. And look at that. Friends ever since, sort of.
I mean,
Definitely.
kind of.
Yeah.
There was some leeway. It takes time to become friends with people.
Right. It's not exactly that amount of time, but yeah. And then we worked together for a little bit because eventually you joined staff officially as well, and that was a fun time. And now you're going on to bigger things out there in Chicagoland. I actually do I think Chicagoland is very fun because it does make it sound like, it's like Tomorrowland or whatever.
Yes.
It's just like, ooh, we're going to Chicagoland. What's there? Are there they're like Chicagoland 7-Elevens.
7-Eleven Speedway. That's what we have here.
Don't you have Circle K's as well?
We do.
It's very important.
I remember, when I came out for my interview, I passed Circle K, and you and I and like a couple other people had just gone to see Bill and Ted.
Uh-huh.
They were showing it at the Alamo, and I remember texting you a picture of the Circle K with obviously the caption "Strange things are afoot at the Circle K."
So good.
That's so funny.
It's so
but
awesome.
I actually don't know if I've ever been inside one.
You've
I'm
never
sure
been
it's better
inside
from
one?
the outside than from the inside.
I'm pretty sure it's.
I don't just frequent gas stations to go.
You don't peruse
and
them.
I just had a reason to go.
You don't peruse them. You don't ever go and see which one's the best. You're not making a tier list.
I mean, I know which one's the best in Nebraska. Here, yet to be decided.
What's the best one in Nebraska?
Quick Trip. Also cemented from an interaction that we had together coming back from a concert. Because we stopped at a Quick Trip.
Slushies, yeah.
And we got the best slushie I've ever had in my life. And that was it. That's enough for me.
Yeah. Well, fun fact about Faith, she does like slushies.
I do.
She does like them quite a bit.
Don't.
She doesn't love people knowing that about her, but she did kind of out herself.
That's okay. That's okay. There are worse things to know about me, so I will take this for internet purposes.
Yeah. Now, this is something that I think is very impressive about you. You are quite an artist yourself. What kind of arts do you dabble in? And you think you could list them off the dome, just rattle off what you're working in right now, what you're doing?
Yeah. I play guitar. I play piano. I sing. I sew. Right now I'm working on another set of curtains for my house. I paint. I do just general crafting. So I'm working on an art project that's a giant matchbox. And I do a lot of building DIY things. I have basically everything in my living room is something that I've made. My curtains I've made. I have a record player stands that I made and tiled and learned how to do grout and buy paint and things like that. A bookshelf that I made and a really big mirror. So yeah, I like to just be able. Also, all the pillowcases for all the pillows on the couch I'm sitting on, I have made. So,
really?
Yes, all of those things.
Yeah, and you've also made your own clothes. You've sculpted.
I actually I'm wearing shorts that I made right now.
Yeah,
that falls underneath sewing.
Yeah, it does. It does. I don't know if you mentioned this, but you've also written your own songs, and that's really cool. Yeah, just a really a Renaissance woman, if you will. How's that for a title?
Thank you.
I think that's a fair title because I do not do nearly all of those things. Yeah, the Matchbox is crazy, but the finished product I'm sure will be pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's so fun. That's just never enough hobbies.
Yeah. Never. I don't know. Sometimes I'm could I have a few? I have expensive hobbies, I suppose. Yeah. So, having known you, it's clear that you have a drive and passion for art and creativity. Like we just discussed, you just have, and like you said at the beginning, you just love all these different kinds of art. You make it. So, where do you think that comes from? Can you kind of trace a little bit how that developed in your life?
Yeah. I was always a very sensitive child. And my parents, which I will speak more on their influence in the future, but my parents are just really, really encouraging all the time of any of my interests. Anything that I ever was oh, well, maybe I could do that. They'd be of course you can, and we'd love to help you. So I think that is really a big push for things. But I was never competitive. I played sports. I did not like them. I just played them because that's what you're supposed to do when you're a kid. But I really just enjoy non-competitive things, and art is something like that for me. So it's something that doesn't have inherent goodness or badness. Like it can't be weighed. You can get first place in like art things, but like it's not something that is valued on like, oh, this is number 1 and this is number 10, because it's subjective. And I really always liked that. And I just like making what I like. And that is something you don't really get to do that in like organized different types of things. And so I like to have an outlet where I can just make whatever I want to. And if people like it, that's great. And if they don't, I am enough.
That's very cool. I like that perspective a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I think I definitely was the same way. I did some sports growing up, but I just like didn't care about the competition. And I feel, looking back on it, I feel bad now because I'm like, I definitely was the weak link on a lot of teams. But it's just because I was just a little boy who wanted to daydream and just like, and I was just like, I want to make movies. So I don't want to kick a ball. So that was me. So with that in mind, competition, it's not about a competition, but you do have favorites. And I wonder if there's any good art that you're appreciating lately.
I have been really getting into lately the art of comedy, stand-up comedy, which is it's just a type of art that I don't think we like think about as art until you like get into the nitty-gritty of like, oh no, they are writing and they're like working with the crowd and they have to have stage presence, all those things. But that really, my parents are very funny. But I grew up listening to Pandora with my mom. And there was like a clean comedy station that would like cycle through Brian Regan and Jim Gaffigan and Michael. And it would be like, it would get to be the same like kind of bits over and over again, but that was fine because then we could just like do them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, lately I've been having a big resurgence in just really enjoying those types of things and the art that is spoken comedy, because I think it's such a smart art form. Like you just have to be really smart to be funny. And I think that's cool. Yeah.
Who would you say is your favorite stand-up comedian right now?
That's not fair. I don't know that I have a favorite. I really like Mike Birbiglia.
Okay.
I like his podcast. I like his stand-up. I like his vibe. It's very not stand-up comedian vibe. It's very like awkward dad vibe.
Yeah.
And I like that in a famous person. So yeah, I think that his stuff is great. But I also, like Taylor Tomlinson is great. I've always loved Jim Gaffigan. I can get into like a Mulaney deep dive if I need to. So
yeah,
lots of options.
I've been recently watching a guy that he usually posts on YouTube. His name is Josh Johnson. And I really like his stuff. He has kind of a, I don't know if awkward dad would be the vibe. Somebody said he's like the Mr. Rogers of comedy. And I would say that's not too terribly far off. He often kind of is very introspective about the art form of comedy itself as he's like doing it. And he has like, 20 to 30 minute sets about just like current events. It's crazy, honestly, how fast he puts this stuff up. And just releases weekly these sets, and they're pretty dang good. He gets some genuine laughs out of me. So, Josh Johnson, if you're looking for something new, check him out.
I will.
So with that out of the way, thank you again for being here. Let's get into the movie. What did we watch, Faith?
We watched School Ties.
Oh my gosh. School Ties. School Ties, released in 1992, directed by Robert Mandel. He didn't really do much other than this, but do you know who wrote this movie?
I did at one point, and I don't think I remember now. Please enlighten me.
Dick Wolf, the creator of actual Law and Order. Did you know
Are
that?
you? No, I did not.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's the creator of Law and Order wrote this movie.
Okay.
So,
well, what good range. You love to see a director or writer with range.
I said, yeah. There, I mean, you can kind of like, there is like an intensity about this movie that is kind of there. It's obviously not a procedural, but there is like, yeah, I don't know. There's something about it that I can kind of see it, but it was definitely a shock to me. I saw his name and I said, who now? That guy? Is it the same one?
Yeah.
There's probably not that many Dick Wolves out there, but maybe I'd be surprised.
I feel like actually it could be a really common name.
It might be really common. He did say, it's interesting, before we get this will mean more as we get into the movie, but he I think he said that like it's not like a straight autobiography, but apparently there is some basis in his experiences as a young man, which is just interesting. And honestly, I could see that. I feel like you can't write a movie like this without having some kind of like, that can't come from anywhere else but some kind of personal experience, I think. For a movie to come out about something like this and be good and feel authentic, like it's got to come from somewhere real. So before we get into anything else, we just like to do a brief summary of what happened. So Faith, do you think you could give us just an outline of the plot so people know what they're getting into?
I would love to. It basically, the movie starts, it follows a boy named David, who is played by Brendan Fraser. David is the star of his football team. He's a quarterback in his small town, and he is recruited to play football for this prestigious prep school that is basically a gateway to the Ivies.
Catholic prep school. That's important.
Yes. Sorry, that's very important. There's Catholic prep school. So he goes and he starts getting plugged in. But his big secret that all of the administrators have told him to keep a secret is that he's Jewish.
Yeah.
And that is not okay at the school.
Yeah, because it's set in the 50s in Northeastern America.
Yeah. So he kind of goes about his life. He's making friends, and he is just hiding this really big fact about himself. Yeah. And it comes out in different ways, but I don't know how far you want me to get into the meat of the plot. But I
think that's what you need to know going in, because we learned pretty quickly that he's Jewish, and that's a big identity marker for him. And yeah, obviously in the environment he's in causes a lot of tension, and that's the conflict of the movie, is how's this guy going to survive with this big thing this huge part of his identity that he's hiding. And yeah, so if that entices you at all, go ahead and pause this, watch the movie. It's available for free on Pluto. So if you're willing to endure the ads, you can watch it for free, or you can pay a few bucks, watch it on Amazon or Google Play, those sorts of places. So yeah. So with that, we'll just get into the rest of it. Faith, do you like this movie, and why?
I do like this movie. I think that our parents influence our art a lot. Okay. And this was a movie that my parents made us watch when we were kids. Me and my younger brother. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those where I was like, this is so lame. Like, you guys don't know what's cool. And then we started watching it, and I was like, oh no, I think you guys might be cool, actually. Yeah. And yeah, so I think I watched it for the first time. I was definitely out of middle school, but maybe just barely. Probably a freshman in high school. Yeah. And I've watched it a couple of times since, but I do really like it. I think that it's good. I think the storyline has a lot of layers to it. It is, which we don't have to get into this, but it is similar in some senses to Dead Poet Society. Yeah. I believe it came out 3 years after Dead Poet Society. and there are a lot of similarity, not a lot, but a couple of similarities.
Same composer.
Oh, is that true?
Yep, same composer.
Oh, that makes sense why I like both of the scores so much. Yeah, there are a couple of similarities, like plot points. I mean, it takes place in like a really prestigious prep school.
Yeah.
Everyone is a boy. There's like maybe one or two female characters. And then there is like kind of a weak guy who deals with like some mental health problems.
Yeah.
So there's some of that, but really that is not what whereas in Dead Poet Society, that's what the story's about. Like just these guys dealing with like their identities. School Ties is more like, these are our identities. They're not the same. How can we reconcile that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you had, when you first told me about this movie, you mentioned it and said we should watch it for the show. You said, it's like, your words were, it's like Dead Poet Society, but with anti-Semitism. And I was like, okay, all right. That's okay. You got me hooked. I'm interested in what that could possibly be. And I agree. Yeah. Visually, it's very much like Dead, because it's, Northeastern, beautiful, like fall colors. I mean, it's shot pretty beautifully. Like not even just like with like really, there's not a lot of shots that really stood out to me, except for the one at the beginning. David's driving in his car and you see his face reflected in the windshield, and that's just like a really cool shot. But for the most part, he's just capturing what's there, but what's there is really beautiful. And yeah, I could just look at those. There's like a shot or two of like David walking across a field, and the trees are all in fall color, and it's like, oh man, I would like to be there. I would like to be there. Yeah. I liked this movie too. And, I felt like it was, I think it dove even deeper and went even wider with what it dealt with than what I anticipated just from that brief summary. And, that was something that surprised me very much, but also, hey, great cast, crazy cast. Can you remember?
Crazy cast.
Can you remember all the big names that are in the cast?
I can name you three of them. They're the biggest to me. And you can tell me if I'm wrong. There is Brendan Fraser there, and then there are the Wonder Boys, young Ben Affleck and young Matt Damon.
Yeah, okay. There is a fourth that I would mention, Chris O'Donnell, but that's just because I watched NCIS LA a lot growing up. So.
Well, that makes sense with Law and Order. There's a lot of crossover happening.
I don't know. Yeah, Dick Wolf approached him later and he's like, "Hey, it's not for my show, but you want to do this?" But this is 92. This is before George of the Jungle. This is the same year Brendan Fraser was in Encino Man, which was his first major role. It's before
what dueling roles, because one is so serious, and Encino Man is like
so silly.
Just pretend you don't know anything. You've never known anything, and that's your whole character.
Yeah, you're literally a caveman who's been frozen. Yeah, that is a wild movie. This is like before Good Will Hunting. These are some fresh faced boys. They, it's still the 90s, so they are still adults playing teenagers, but they're not that far off.
No,
they're not that far off. What else though? What else stands out to you about this movie that makes you really enjoy it?
I really like, and we'll get more into this later, but I really like that it ends unresolved. I like that it's a clear picture of progress. Progress is made throughout the movie, but nothing is solved. And I think that is a really good reflection on these types of issues that we deal with, where unfortunately that is just the case. Things aren't probably going to just be solved. We're not going to cure like our major social biases, but I do like being able to see that progress has been made.
Yeah.
And that if it can even change one person's perspective, I think that it's important. So I like that about it.
Yeah. Wow. I have the movie on in the background, and we're just getting introduced to all the boys. And Matt Damon's introduction, he's so bright, so cheery, so happy faced. Ha. And that reminds me, actually, one thing I really liked about this movie is in some regards, it really took me back to dorm life and just how much I enjoyed that. There's moments of just boys being boys in the best way possible. Just being goofy, being dumb, singing songs in the dorm room. And it just like made me really miss that time of like being able to just like step across the hall and see some of my best friends. And there's something about that. And it helps, like, having known that feeling, it makes total sense why David hides in the movie, why he kind of attempts to assimilate, is because like he doesn't want, and he explicitly says this, he doesn't want all that to go away, because it is a really special time in your life to kind of figure out what it's like to live next to each other and all the frustrations and joys that come with that. So that was one aspect I really enjoyed. Oh, I'm at the scene where they say this thing. Chris O'Donnell says the thing. He says, "School tie. You need a school tie." And that we'll want to discuss that later. But it's shot beautifully. The plot's great. Really makes me think of good college days. Great acting. Good music. The music is good.
The theme is good, and it varies, I think, throughout the movie.
Yeah,
which I like about a theme, where you can kind of tell, but when it's an emotionally high point, it like kind of shifts to like a minor key, and then there's like some variation, and then when it's like kind of back to like the norm, it goes back, and I like that kind of storytelling within the theme musically.
Yeah, that's a once you lock in. I'm so glad that I went through like a little bit of education talking about like, here's how music is used in, dramatic narratives like this. Like you can have different motifs and the theme can change based on what's happening. Like that is really cool. I did think sometimes the music felt a little ill-fitting. And I think your review is only 3.5 stars. So I'm curious to know what your cons are. I have a few of my own, but I'd be curious to know yours. What are some things that are some drawbacks just for you personally?
For me personally, I like a little bit more nuance. And I think the movie is nuanced. Yeah. But I do think that it is right away, really explicitly. I mean, within the first 3 minutes, like this movie is about anti-Semitism. It's overt. It's happening. That's what the movie is about. Sure. And I like that. I like what it's about. I enjoyed the movie. But I would have loved a little bit more of a build-up, and maybe to see some discrimination happening like first, before they're just like, I hate you because you're a Jew. Like, I wish that they would have been like, I hate you, here are all the things I'm doing to it. And then later we would find out, oh, this is why. That's and why. Kind of build a little bit more. That was one of my biggest cons.
Yeah, I think I feel a little bit the same way, that it could have been built up a little bit more, that maybe we could have seen a little bit more of just like the little, and we do see a little bit of that at the very beginning, but just like a little bit more of like just the little things that kind of grind at him and make it a little bit more difficult. And yeah, it's true. And sometimes it's like some characters are like cartoonishly anti-Semitic, and I would like all of that to be removed. There's a character who has like huge glasses, and so he looks silly as he says all these awful things, and it's like, I get what you're doing, but like make him look normal, because that's like more real. And yeah, that was one of my things, is like there's some moments of levity that I was just like, I don't think that's, and I don't mean, again, like the scene where they're all singing together in the dorm, I think it's great, but I mean like there's a scene where they prank a teacher by putting his car inside a building, and it's like, how did they do that? Why is it shot this way? Why did he go out on a brisk walk for apparently no reason? A very brief walk that takes like 2 minutes, and also random students are dressed like the teacher. Did not have anything else to do with the prank, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that it was funny. I agree that like it doesn't logically make sense, but I also think it speaks to like these boys are so upset at this teacher who has just like basically ruin the life of one of their best friends.
Yeah.
And they have no other way to like get back him other than something that's like really stupid and not planned and just like the most aggressive thing they could think of that wouldn't get them in big trouble. And I think that kind of plays on that, but it does. I mean, the logic does fall short. That's true.
I feel like it's just a bump in the tone, because I said this in my review that it's just like, just have the crushing sense of isolation throughout. Don't lift it off me. I'm okay with it being there. It's supposed to be there. But yeah, with like a prank like that, you're right. It is definitely like, if you could pull it off, it is something a teenage boy would think to do. And there is, I think a lot of the movie hinges on a realistic portrayal of high school boys. And I think they achieved that pretty much for the most part. Do a pretty good job. Yeah. There's not a ton more that I was like, there was one thing that this isn't really a complaint necessarily. It's just something that I thought was funny. I did not expect. There's a lot of dude booty in this movie. A lot of dude booty in this movie.
I'm so sorry. I totally forgot, and I was watching it, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" The most emotionally tense scene of the movie basically starts and ends with Matt Damon's butt, and there's like, I totally forgot. And as I was watching it, I was like, "Oh no!" I recommended other people to watch this, and I'm a little bit embarrassed. But you know what? That's okay. I do think you added to the storyline.
Well, yes, it's definitely, I mean, it's a very vulnerable place to be in. And just to be clear, this is a PG-13 rated movie. So it is just dude booty. And so
it's just that.
For one thing,
it's okay.
For one thing, great camera work, incredible blocking that they were able to just have that happen.
It actually is. It actually is, because they're moving a lot.
They're moving. They're fighting.
And
there's a fight that breaks out.
The fact that they're like fighting really. I mean, it's a climax of the movie. I never even worried for a second. I was like, I'm not worried at all that I'm going to see anything.
I love that. I trust these filmmakers. I know what they're doing.
I do.
Well, it's hilarious. It's hilarious to me. Like, this movie and Eastern Promises are the only two that I know of that feature a naked shower fight. So, hey, that's
gotta watch more movies, Tucker. Gotta get out there.
Are there more that you know of?
Yeah.
What? Like what?
I mean, that's not what we're here to talk about.
But I'm curious. What do you mean? I really want to know what you mean.
Well, we'll talk later.
Okay.
There are some things I don't need the internet to know.
Okay.
And that's okay.
Fine. Okay, fine. So yeah, that scene is actually, it's humorous to me that it was just like, oh shoot, they're just walking in. It's a wide frame. But that is actually a very good scene. Sometimes, like I said, the camera work's not exceptional, and sometimes it throws in some random things. And I'm like, why is that there? Like, there's a Dutch angle in one scene, then I'm like, I don't know why that's there. But I mean, yeah, overall solid movie. Good 90s drama, again in the vein of like Dead Poet Society, and yeah, I'd recommend it to people for sure. I think it's good. Yeah, I think we'll be able to talk about a few more pros when we get into our 3 favorite scenes. So this segment of the show, we did it last time. We're going to do it again because it was so much fun. We're just going to trade off talking about our 3 favorite scenes. So Faith, tell me about what your first favorite scene was.
Can I don't know if this is against the rules. Can I just say that an honorable mention is the scene where they are singing in one of the dorm rooms, and one of their teachers comes in to break it up. Yes. And David makes, like, basically the teacher says, we don't have to live like animals. This isn't the jungle.
Yeah. And as he's walking
David,
out,
like, as the teacher's walking out, makes like a little monkey noise.
Yep.
And he, like, the teacher walks a little bit more and he makes some more. And then as the teacher leaves, he makes this like huge Tarzan cry.
Yeah.
Which I just think it's so funny. That's an honorable mention to me.
That's what got him George of the Jungle, Faith. That
I was literally gonna say, this sounds very natural to this man.
That's crazy. That might have been. Could you imagine some guy in the theater is like 1992 seeing this movie, and he's like, this very heavy drama, and he's like, that guy could be my Goofy Tree Man.
Yeah. I mean, combined School Ties with Encino Man, George of the Jungle.
that would.
I just saw my guess.
You know what? We'll leave other minds to determine how appropriate that equation is.
That's fair. What is do you have an honorable mention, or what's your?
Well, actually, my first pick is going to be that scene, because again, it just like immediately made me think of. Well, actually, you know what? I will honorable mention before I get into that. Honorable mention, because it's happening in front of me on my screen, and it's reminding me of how cool those scenes were when they're in French class, and the teacher who this teacher that they prank, who's super just like hard on them. It's a very advanced French class at a preparatory school, so they're just speaking French, and there are no English subtitles, but you're still able to tell everything that's going on, like every little moment where he's like pushing harder, he gets annoyed, or the student's nervous. Like it's executed so well, and those little collections of scenes are very fun, very good, very well done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that one of my favorite scenes is David and Dylan, played by Matt Damon, are kind of fast friends. When they are sitting on a dock, like by the lake, by the pool, or by the school, and Dylan is like, basically has his whole life planned for him. He's like a junior. Everyone in his family has gone to Harvard, and they're like really successful. His dad's like the governor, and he sits there and he tells David that he envies David's authenticity,
right? Because
David just gets to be whoever he wants to be. He doesn't have to live up to anyone's expectations. And I just think that scene is so powerful, because what Dylan doesn't know is that that's not true, and that David is living an authentic life.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's really powerful to see just on the outside what it looks like when other people have what we want. That's not always the truth. And I just really like it.
Yeah, that is a great scene. Then actually I had a really hard time picking a top three, because I think there's really good individual scenes that are really good for different reasons. But yeah, I like the scene in the dorm room, because it's that scene of camaraderie, but also it's the first time in the school where, like, David's there, he's met all the guys, things are going great. And then one of them uses the term Jew in a derogatory way. It's used twice. I think
he uses it. I think he says, I got this. He's talking about his record player, and he's like, I got it for really cheap. I Jewed him down. Yeah.
And it was like, ooh. And obviously, like, David immediately like clocks that, and he's like listening. And it really it breaks down that scene of camaraderie. But then it picks back up when the teacher comes in, and he's like, he says the jungle thing, and he makes the noise, because he's like, he wants to be accepted. And it's that first moment where he is just kind of like assimilating, just kind of allowing his identity, like he's okay with letting it just kind of not be noticed, for the sake of continuing to have this community. And yeah, I thought that was a really powerful scene, and it's the start of his troubles, even though it's the start of this community that he has on school. I think it's right after that scene that he takes off this necklace he has. It might even be before that, but he has a necklace with a David star on it, and he looks at it and he hides it in his dresser. And he just makes sure that nobody can see it. So he's just like, he's not wanting to cost himself this community. So what about your second pick? What'd your second pick be?
I'm trying to decide if I want to go chronologically or in order of importance. But I think I'm going to go chronologically. Even though I think this is the most important conversation in the movie for us as a Christian audience watching this movie. I think this is really powerful. There's a scene where David he plays a football game on a Saturday, but it's Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
And so he missed like a really big, important holy day.
Yep.
And so that night he is in the chapel at school, which is not a Jewish chapel.
Yeah.
And so it's the juxtaposition is really cool because there's like a cross on the wall, but he is wearing a yarmulke.
Yeah.
And he is praying in Hebrew. And the dean of the school comes in and says, well, like, what are you doing in here? And the dean knows that he's Jewish. And David said, well, it's Rosh Hashanah. I missed it for the football game. And the dean says, you people are very determined, aren't you?
Yeah.
And David doesn't really know what to say. So he's like, yes, we are. And then the dean says, and he quotes the Bible, and he says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And it is, I think, such a powerful example of what it looks like when we weaponize the Bible.
Yeah.
Because that dean, who is supposed to be the most religious of the whole school, the best at his relationship with Jesus, he uses the Bible to cut down somebody who he doesn't agree with. Yeah. And to actually use the Bible as a source of shame to kind of threaten any opposition that might come. And I just thought that was really prevalent, really important. It's an interesting scene because he says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And David responds really quickly, I wonder how meek they'll be when they do, sir.
Yeah, that's a good line.
And it's very poignant. For me, it was the most poignant scene of the movie. Yeah. But that was, I think, just really important, really special. And it was a really stark example of what it looks like to use the Bible against people you don't agree with.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a great scene. And it is very cool. What another thing I liked about this movie is it felt like it was very, I mean, obviously, I don't know like 100% certain, but Dick Wolf is probably Jewish based on the fact that he wrote this movie.
I looked it up. I believe he is.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously this would be here, but I do appreciate just like the honorable depiction of just like a working class Jewish family that honors tradition. Like his dad is the one who calls him and says, hey, it's Rosh Hashanah. Don't forget, go to temple no matter what. And that's what drives him to go and read these prayers. And it feels so authentic and I just really appreciated that. I love the part. It's a very small moment where his dad like prays a blessing over him as he's about to go on the bus to the school. And I just think that's cool. I like that honorable depiction. And yeah, that is a great scene. I would say my second pick, it is honestly so tough. Like I said, there's just like a lot of individual scenes that I could pick, but I think my second favorite scene is when David first meets a girl named Sally, who is for the streets. First of all, let me say, that feels really aggressive. I mean, we do have to.
I don't think that's true, but what do you have to say? Tell me your thoughts.
Well, I was gonna say I am only mostly joking. She is definitely. It's one of those things where everybody in this movie is a teenager, and we'll get into that a little bit more. I think that's really important that they're all teenagers. But he meets this girl named Sally for the first time, and he's starting to kind of rub elbows with the upper crust with Dylan and his family, and because they're at a dance where they get the girls' school and the boys' school together, and they get the dance. And he meets this girl named Sally, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's Dylan's girl, is Sally." And they have a conversation, they dance, and immediately it's like, oh, they like each other. But then, like at the end of it, Dylan comes and gets Sally and says, thanks for taking care of my girl. And clearly they like each other. And so,
which important to note that she in fact was not Dylan's girl.
Right. Yeah.
It is just by societal standards, their family shares woods.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how they know each other.
And they spend so much time together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he is not her boy, and and that was a cool moment because that was another like pivotal moment where I think that was the first moment when I realized like, oh shoot, this movie is about so much more than just anti-Semitism, because it's setting up this like classic adolescent conflict of like, oh, there's gonna be some jealousy there. Dylan's gonna hate that he's dancing with his girl, you know. So I just thought that was a cool scene, and it sets up stuff later that, I mean, maybe your third pick might be the scene that is important for that. So you tell me what your third one is.
I don't know if it's what you're thinking of. My third one also has to do with Sally, though. They basically, brief summary, they like kind of go out for a little bit. They're dating, whatever. And then it happens it is revealed to Dylan that David is Jewish.
Yeah.
And then Dylan makes a scene. And it gets back to Sally. And she stops like taking his calls, and she stops seeing him. And so he shows up to her swim practice.
This is what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. He pulls her out of the pool. Well, I mean, not physically, but he's like, hey,
Brendan Fraser walks up and grabs her out of the pool. I don't think that'd be.
Yeah. No. But they're having a conversation, and she's like, I can't do this. Like, you lied to me. And he's like, no, I didn't. Like, I lied to myself. Like, you don't understand. And she's like, we just can't. And he goes, I'm still the same person.
Oh,
and she said,
hurts.
I know.
It hurts.
And he's like, okay, well, she knows, so it must mean she's okay. And so he like moves in to kiss her, and she pulls back, and she's like, I can't.
For the streets.
It's a bad look for her. It's a bad look for her. It's so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking because it is simply her, which we get into later, but her giving in to the things that are expected of her societally.
Yeah. And
he would never, ever live it down if she was dating a Jewish man. Like she says, her friends, in front of her, they ask her what it's like to kiss him and if his nose gets in the way.
Ugh.
And that's like such a poignant thing in her. That's like something that she lives. She's like, this is too hard. Look at what my friends are asking me, with like no consideration for how he might feel about being made fun of for his physical appearance. But I think it's a really strong scene. Yeah,
that's a good one. And my third pick is very towards the end of the movie. So all this has happened. It's come out that he's a Jew. It's really changed the way a lot of the guys look at him. He's had to have some hard conversations with people about like, hey, like this wasn't a problem before. And, you know, people are kind of telling him, well, you didn't tell us. And he's like, you didn't ask, and all that sort of stuff. And it's just become a whole thing. And eventually there is a situation in which Dylan is cheating on a test. It's like one of the biggest tests of the year, and he's cheating on it. And David and another guy see Dylan cheating. They know he's done it. They walk out, and Dylan drops the slip of paper he had been using. And so the teacher knows. And he, we're at the dance scene that I talked about, actually. Forgot about. They hand out balloons to put between the dancers and say, leave room for the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Funny. I didn't know that actually happened. That's amazing.
Yeah, I didn't know that it does.
Yeah.
And that could be movie magic.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it is. But anyway, cheating happens. The teacher knows, and he says, look, if you don't fess up, whoever did it, you are all failing. And, of course, can't have that. So they're like, okay, how do we figure this out? They all like are in a room together. It's very 12 Angry Men. This part of the movie is very much like 12 Angry Men, where it's just dudes in a room talking about something, having debates. Well, before that, David goes to Dylan's room and he says, look, if you don't fess up, I'm going to say what happened, and you're not going to have any defense because I know you did it. So in the meeting, before, just as David's going to stand up and say what's going on, Dylan preemptively stands up and accuses David of cheating. And of course, David insists that's a lie, but everybody thinks these horrible things about Jewish people and say like, well, he's a Jewish person. He had that about himself, so maybe he would be lying about this. And so they have this meeting where they all vote who they think did it, and it's very tense indeed. And and it leads to them, like they come out of it and they say, all right, David, we're gonna send you to the headmaster. You should turn yourself in, even though there's the guy who basically chaired the meeting knows that Dylan cheated. So that whole
which I think it's important to mention that the guy who noticed, besides David, that Dylan cheated was Dylan's roommate and had been Dylan's roommate for 4 years.
Yes, he says that. So I guess just to assuage your fears, or I guess hopefully you've watched the movie, but if you haven't, David goes to the headmaster. He turns himself in, and he's not happy about it, but he says like, I'll live your lie, or something like that. I will lie for you. You know what? I'll do it. And it turns out that Dylan's roommate has actually come and told the truth. And so David is saved. Dylan is expelled. But David makes it clear to the headmaster in that moment, to the dean. He says, you used me for football, I'll use you to get to Harvard. Like, he knows, like, if he would have kicked me to the curb in a heartbeat if a bunch of kids sent me to you saying that he cheated. So I am just going to not give you, I'm going to give you the same kind of disregard. But yeah, that scene is just, it's so tense, and just a lot of high emotions, which I like. And Chris O'Donnell brings his A game, and he's like one of the dissenters. He says like, no, it was Dylan, and I know exactly why you guys are doing this. It's just because David's Jewish. Great scene. Good movie. I'd forgotten to mention earlier on, I also love the moments when David like doesn't know what to do when they're in chapel and they're doing the hymns and the prayers.
It's so funny because they're all praying and he's just kind of like looking around. Yeah. He like doesn't know when to close his eyes. It's very funny.
Yeah, I love that. I'm at the scene where he's meeting Sally. There she is. Freaking
their dynamic is so funny. He like doesn't know what to say to her, and she's like, blah, 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 and he's like, I think you're so pretty.
Yeah.
And that's like how he like can express his love. Hey, it's so funny.
It's very.
I mean, it works.
It works.
It works.
It works. Yeah. So those are our 3 favorite scenes. We're making great time. I was kind of honestly afraid. We tend to have long conversations, and so I was kind of afraid we would just be totally out of hand with the time on it. But we're making pretty good time. So high five from me.
I'm really tamping it in.
Yeah, you're tamping it down, trying to restrain yourself. Yeah. Somebody's holding you back.
That's true.
Somebody's off camera, like doing like motioning to stop.
Yeah.
So let's get into themes, because I'm really excited to get into the thematic breakdown, because like I said, I think it's so much deeper and wider than just like it's not just about anti-Semitism, it's about other things. But what themes stand out to you in the movie?
Well, I liked, and I want to go back to one of my scenes that I talked about because it ties in. The scene where Dylan tells David, I'm really jealous of your authenticity. You just get to be whoever you want. And we all know that that's not true. I think that the movie tonally has a similar tone, because the movie is really outwardly about anti-Semitism. And I think that, well, I don't think, I know. I have a degree in psychology, and so I think about people's motives a lot. But oftentimes we are overly authentic in one area of our life to kind of cover up that there is something else going on underneath. And nobody assumes that the person who is always oversharing is also hiding something. But I think that the movie is really outwardly about anti-Semitism, and that covers up the deeper ideal of the movie, which is power dynamics between peers.
Yeah.
I think the power dynamics between the peers is such a strong theme. There's clearly, I mean, in every situation, there's always a winner and a loser. Okay. Whether that's like in football, whether that is in like their dynamics, like who is the funniest, who is like doing the best, who gets the girl. Um, and like who gets the best grades, who's going to the best college. There's always a winner.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's cool.
Yeah. Then added on top of that the dynamic between religious majority and how we assume religious majority in the as teenagers. So.
Oh, yeah. Those are some really good insights and observations. Yeah, that's interesting. Just the idea of like outwardly appearing to be one thing while still hiding something. Because I think not only thematically, but also just like appearance. Because, again, it looks kind of like Dead Poet Society. It's very like idyllic, Northeastern America, New England. Why am I not saying you're just saying New England? It's called New England. Boston, right? Specifically Boston.
I don't know.
I think it's Boston, but
that sounds right. That sounds right because of the accent.
Yeah,
I think there's some of that.
But like, it's Boston. It's beautiful, outwardly very idyllic and just like sunny and everything. But it's kind of an oppressive movie. Like the mood of it is like, and I think a lot of that is because I think a big theme is like assimilation and hiding yourself for the sake of, because like that's what really makes it kind of like, whoa, like really like kind of press down on you is like you are with David and you're watching him hide more and more of his identity as time goes on, and having to endure more and more verbal abuse and more just like seeing discrimination and like choosing not to do anything about it because he doesn't want to lose what he has. So I think that's a big theme, is assimilation, and that kind of ties into what I think, honestly, like alongside just the situation of being a Jewish young man in the 50s, like expectations put on young men is a huge theme. Like everybody at the school has major expectations on them because they're all supposed to go to Ivy League colleges and they're all supposed to be the best. I think he says it, like the dean says it in his opening speech, and he's shot from below, so he looks huge, and he's talking about like you're supposed to be the best of the best, right? He says something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, he says,
and it's bad. It's a bad scene. He basically says like you are the majority.
You're the elite.
As the majority, yeah, you're the elite. Thank you. Oh my gosh, and just the word elite. I definitely had a note about it. I'm trying to find it. Yeah, it's a very powerful scene where he basically is like, you're the elite, and as the elite, it's your job to maintain your eliteness by being kind and showing love, but you're doing those things to maintain your position.
Yeah, and that's no good.
No.
Yeah, but there's all these expectations to be that, and it's on Dylan. It's not really on David. His are different expectations, but I think it's interesting seeing from his perspective all these young men like Dylan, Mac, the class clown, who he's supposed to go to Yale, I think, and he's failing French. And I'm actually seeing it right now. There's a scene where he's failed this test miserably, and so again, thinking about Dead Poet Society, I thought it was going to go in a certain direction.
It did go in that same direction. It just stopped before the end.
It stopped a little short before. He did not ride down the sewer slide. He did not do that. It was glad it didn't. I was very nervous that I was going to go that direction, but he ends up just like having a mental breakdown basically and just mumbling the words of this test over and over again. And they find him like catatonic, and they send him away, and David's like, what's going to happen to him? And they're like, he's never coming back. Like it's this pressure makes some of them cave. And obviously, yeah, Dylan's got this pressure of his family and these expectations. And he's living under the shadow of his brother, or at least he feels that way. And in the moment he thinks that like Dylan's like the villain of the movie. And I think you said it's very nuanced, toward the beginning of the episode. And I think part of that is that, Dylan, it's one of those things where, Dylan is awful. Dylan is prejudiced and does some really awful things to try and get David out, and to just stomp on him and honestly, I think his reasoning, I don't even think it has much to do with the fact that he's Jewish. It's just that him being Jewish gives him an avenue to lash out at him for being better at football, for stealing his girl, like all those young teenage guy things that are dumb and don't matter, but you're young and you don't know any better and you have all this pressure on you. And so he is like, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't quite feel sorry for him, but it is like, and he probably won't learn because they come from these environments where that's what they're brought up in. Like a lot of these guys, they say these things about Jewish people, they think these things, and it's like, well, where did they learn that? Probably just their parents. Like they're just parroting what their parents said. And yeah, like that kind of reinforcement and pressure, like it destroys young men. It makes them into really vindictive jerks like Dylan. And yeah, it's definitely like right alongside the experience of being a Jewish person. I think is the most important thing is that pressure that they have on them.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, Dylan, as a person, because he loves David. Like he's enamored by David, but he kind of resents him, like under the surface.
Yep.
And the further in you get, the more resentment you see kind of peek out. But also at the same time, the more you realize that Dylan actually hates himself.
Oh, expand on that.
He does. He hates that he's not as good at football as his brother or as David. He hates that the only reason he's with Sally or thinks he's with Sally is because their families are connected. And there's a conversation where David does really great at their homecoming game and Dylan fumbles and like does a bad job, and his dad is kind of coaching him through that. And basically it's very clear that David has not a worry in the world about football, but it's all consuming for Dylan. And he hates that David gets to just be carefree when we know that David doesn't get to be carefree. But and I think, truthfully, Dylan thinks he's stupid. He doesn't think he's a good student. He's not a good student, but he thinks that he's a bad student, and so he doesn't try.
Oh, thinking about himself, is what you're saying.
Yeah, thinking about himself. And I think Dylan is very intimidated by David's intelligence.
Well, yeah,
and that's why he cheats on the test, because he thinks that he's not a good enough student to be able to pass.
Yeah. Yeah, it's shown that we never see David struggle in class, and it's clear that he's very confident in his academic abilities.
I think he's fluent in French. I think they established that pretty early on in the French class.
In the scene where
he could respond well.
Yeah, when Mac breaks down, he like gets in front of him and like recites the poem with him, and like kind of just helps him just stay there, So, there's also, go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right.
You got it.
One thing I thought was interesting, people kind of go after David when he's outed as being Jewish. They go after him for saying like, well, you should have told us, you should have said something. And it's such an interesting dynamic, because there is something to be said for like, well, you didn't tell us. Why would you not tell us this big part of your identity? But at the same time, when you're in a situation where you do that to survive, obviously it's one of those things where it's like, if the reasons why they didn't want him to hide that about him were not so prejudiced and awful, like you kind of get it, where it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you trust me with this big part of your identity? Obviously for him, the answer is like,
Christianity is very evangelistic. And so we're always talking, but Judaism is not. And that is a big difference as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And there's a part of it that I think he genuinely doesn't feel a need. There's a part of it that he feels like he needs to protect himself and not talk about it. But that was interesting to me, just that dynamic and that genuine like discourse that could be had there. Like, do you be forthcoming with your identity in all situations, or how do you navigate that when it could be dangerous for you?
Well, and his football coach, when he brings him to the school, he says he tells David, don't tell the other boys that you're Jewish.
Yeah.
He says, play your cards close to your chest. Don't tell the other boys that you're Jewish.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect as well, because the coach knows
Yep.
that's not going to go well.
Yeah. It's a great drama about like just wrestling with your identity and figuring out what to do with that. Now this is something I wanted to bring up to you and just like have you talk about for a little bit, because you, if I recall correctly, we had a conversation about this. Well, more like I just asked you questions and I listened because it was fascinating, but you really do not like private schools, right?
Yes, that's true.
So do you think you could talk a little bit about that and maybe connect it to the things we see in this movie?
Yeah. I think I will probably get in trouble for these thoughts, but that's okay because I feel strongly about it. For reference, I think education is great. I think education is very important. I come from a family of teachers. I really enjoyed all of my schooling. I went to public university. Tucker, I know you went to private university and a Christian university. And I think that's different. But I think one of the reasons, besides like, I think that private schools can very easily lend themselves to discrimination, especially at a young age. A university is different because you're old enough to kind of choose, but prep schools and private schools for younger children, I think can lead to a lot of just situations where you are not taught. You're not taught the things that are important to contributing to a society that believes different things than you. And you see that really clearly in the movie. These boys don't even think to ask if he's a Christian. They ask him. I don't even think they ask him what denomination he is.
Nope.
They just assume that because they're all Christians, and to be fair, they go to Christian school, that he must agree with everything they think and everything they say. And I think that's really dangerous.
Well,
and I also think that, go ahead.
Even so, they're like nominally, like obviously, like you know, at the beginning, they're like, well, you got to go to chapel 3 times a week, but it's whatever. And like, it's one of those things. Yeah. Like, yeah, it is. Yeah. They don't even ask. They just kind of assume that like, well, you must have that name attached to you somehow.
Mm-hmm. What my two biggest concerns with private education for high school and below is the monetary discrepancies. Why should only rich children get to have a nice education? I think that's a big thing, and I know that's not always the case, and there are scholarships and things like that. But for the most part, private schools are very expensive, and the same education is just not afforded to families and children who come from lower income families.
Yeah.
But two, and what speaks more closely to this film for me is ignorance. I'm not saying that children who go to private schools are ignorant, but I am saying that when you are in a bubble for the most important developmental years of your life, it's very hard to learn how to interact with people who are different than you, how to have conversations about something you don't agree in, how to not demonize people who think differently than you, and how to think for yourself. And I think we see all of those things in this movie, where these boys have gone to private school for presumably their whole lives, and will continue to go to private school for their entire educational career. And they all have very similar beliefs about the world. And those are largely unfounded beliefs that are given to them by their teachers, by their parents, by their peers. And never once in this movie, until David comes along, do they even question to think, what would it be like if I was around someone else? They're really early in the movie. Dylan and David are in the shower. Again, they're in the shower a lot. They're clean boys.
Yeah, they're clean boys. We keeping up with the hygiene.
Yeah, they're keeping up with the hygiene. They're in the shower, and Dylan makes a comment about like, oh, they say that there are a lot of Jews at Harvard, and Dylan's like, I don't care that there are Jews at Harvard, like as long as I don't have to live with one, and I don't have to be their friend. And David says, well, how would you know?
How would you know
if you were friends with one? And Dylan was like, well, you would know. Like, you can tell. It's so obvious. And it's just it's funny. It's ironic.
Yeah.
Which is a pinnacle of Jewish humor, that he doesn't know that he's friends with a Jewish person.
Yeah.
And but that bias and that thought process of, well, like, Jews are this way. They're low, they're poor, they're cheap, they're loud, and they're a threat to Christianity, is all these boys have ever been taught. And so when push comes to shove, they don't have anything else to lean on. And the mature boys can think about it, and some of them think about it, and then they still decide, hey, yeah, no, I still don't like Jewish people. But some of them think about it and are like, hey, actually, I think I was wrong. Yeah. And I think that you don't get as many opportunities to do that when you exist in a bubble of people exactly like you.
Yeah. No, I think I agree. And there's even just the word bubble. I did go to a private Christian college, and it was great. I loved it. But we did talk about the Ozark bubble, where we were just like, you live with other Christians, you go to chapel with other Christians, you go to church with other Christians, obviously. But you're with Christians day in, day out, in your classes, at the library, on campus, like your on-campus activities. It's all Christians. And so sometimes, even if you work on campus, your job is with a bunch of Christians. So it's one of those things where, we offer classes on like how to evangelize and how to be somebody who's out in the world talking to people who don't know Jesus and everything. And we encourage that. But I was one of those students where I was just like, I don't really know any non-Christian people in this situation, because it's just like my life is not ordered such that would happen very naturally. So, which is unfortunate. But again, like some people had jobs off campus, or they made more of an effort than I did. And you can escape that bubble, but it is very tough when you're in that environment where everybody seems to think the same way as you. And I think we can pivot into just some spiritual takeaways. And I think it's obvious, there's a big one just for our practice as disciples of Jesus and believers. Don't be anti-Semitic. Hey, how about this? Try this one on.
Yeah, brother.
It's wild to me, like seeing this, like it's in the 50s, and I have a friend who's he works for a ministry called Turn Ministries in Colorado Springs, and they their aim is to evangelize effectively to Jewish people and tell them, hey, Jesus of Nazareth is your Messiah. But in order to even get that far, to even get the chance for a hearing to be able to say that, their efforts right now are a lot of it's based on trying to break down walls that have been built up historically by the church. Writings from people like Martin Luther, and I think another one he mentioned was John Chrysostom, who's like a famous ancient preacher. Like, they said things about Jewish people that were like just so harsh and just so like damning, like really antagonizing, and I think hateful probably wouldn't be too far off, and you hear that all the time, and that becomes ingrained in culture, and there's and people like Turn Ministries are trying to tear down those walls and try and say, hey, no, actually, it's in Romans, I believe, you were grafted onto the tree, the root of the tree, you're grafted onto the family of Israel, that was the people of God. So don't spurn your Jewish predecessors. But like, it's just crazy to me that people, I sound so pretentious. It's crazy to me people think that way. I could never, I could never be hateful. But I mean, like, I've never, thankfully I grew up in a family where that was not how we lived. We were not anti-Semitic or anti anybody. We we're not that way. And so I obviously I've grown into an adult not thinking that way, which I'm thankful for. But yeah, it's crazy to me that there are people who still exist now who just don't like Jewish people and use terms like at the very, very, very beginning of the movie, a guy says like, it doesn't bother you that they killed Christ. Like that thing is like, the classic, like, well, just because somebody's a member of a certain ethnic group that did something thousands of years ago doesn't mean that has anything to do with them. Like that just goes, and also let's not forget, hey, everybody, just in case Jesus was Jewish. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Just need you all to know that really fast.
It's such an interesting concept to me because anytime someone is like, well, Jews killed Christ, I'm like, well, everyone was Jewish there. Like
in that scenario.
Everyone who was there who could have killed Christ was Jewish. And so like,
except for the Romans.
Except for the Romans, but it was the people's court. Like the people were doing it. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, they were administering and like kind of overseeing those things, but it wasn't like we want to do this. I mean, the Pharisees, like the Jews of the Jews, were the ones driving this thing. That was kind of one of my takeaways too. Was what does it look like for Judaism and Christianity to kind of stand next to each other? Because there's a lot of crossover, and I personally am just fascinated by Jewish culture, and spend a lot of time taking in specifically Jewish art, TV shows and movies and paintings and books. I'm reading a book about Jewish comedy right now.
What's that book called?
And it's called Jewish Comedy: A Serious History by Jeremy Dauber.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, it's good. And yeah, I think that it's so interesting because they do have a lot of crossover. I mean, the Old Testament is the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
But there seems to be such a divide in just kind of how that's interpreted and how we treat people. And obviously it's lesser now than it was when this movie was set. But I mean, recently, within the past 10 years, there's been a large resurgence of anti-Semitism. And we've seen a lot of that come out. And for me, same as you, Tucker, I'm like, I just don't understand. I just don't get it. But I do think that there is a role that we have as Christians to show kindness to people who don't believe the same things that we do, but also to defend the people that we don't believe the same things out.
Yeah.
And you can do that without defending what they believe in. Yeah. And I think that's a really important takeaway.
For sure. Yeah. Just with like everything that's, with certain current events, there's been like this crazy uptick in anti-Semitism and, like whatever about your opinion on whatever, the conflicts in the Middle East. But like the fact is Jewish people in America have nothing to do with that. And yet they're just receiving so much hate. And it's baffling. It is truly baffling. How those connections are made in people's head. And again, like it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure I have, I've mistreated people. I've been awful before. So it's like, I'm also stupid, but, it is truly baffling. And that's another thing, by the way, speaking of stupid, like teenagers are kind of dumb in a lot of ways.
They're dumb. Yes, they are.
They're undeveloped. And that's, again, I think there's a huge part of this movie is that like, they don't even fully understand the weight of what they're doing. They're just trying to get ahead because that's all they know. Their world is themselves. At their worst. Yeah. That's how teenagers are. But, another thing I kind of took away was like, I mean, it just made me think like, hey, institutionalized Christianity, and this kind of ties back into your thoughts on private schools. I'm like, get that out of here. Get that out of here.
You're pulling. I know that they can't see, but you're kind of pulling on your neck collar, like you're like sweating. Like that was such a like a spicy thing to say about institutionalized. Like,
it might have been. It might have been.
Funny. I think it was. I think it was funny. Yeah, tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Just like, again, just back to your thoughts on private schools and just like stamping the name of Jesus or a saint on a private school, saying it's like, this is a Catholic institution where we educate. Like, I do think Christians should be the best educated. I think we should pursue learning and be educated and learn more about the world God has given us and things like that. Some of the most learned people in history have been Christians, but again, like you said, in a society where we are, in our culture, with a multiplicity of worldviews, instead of maybe like a majority Christian place, like back when some of the Ivy League schools were founded, they were founded by Christians, and that was part of their aim, was to educate Christian people. And it was mostly, there's a bunch of Christians there, so that's what they did. But now that's not the case. And so what happens is these institutions often become attempts to kind of consolidate power, if that makes any sense. And I am very allergic to all of that. I'm very allergic to any kind of power. And I think that can often be what these Christian schools turn into. And I think that's what happens in this movie is, like I said, they're trying to be the elite. They're trying to gain power through being here. And it doesn't really have that much. It's not like the way of Jesus at all, who, this guy misuses the meek shall inherit the earth. They're not meek at all. They're trying to be the upper crust. And they can, parade about saying they're trying to be beneficent, but, behind closed doors, they're just talking about everything they want to do. Like at the end of the movie, Dylan gets expelled from the school and he says, you know what? I'm still going to Yale. That's still going to happen. And it's like, yeah, like it doesn't have anything to do with faith. I just think and that's often what happens when anything that is not the church, as it's supposed to be, a group of people following Jesus and meeting other people and inviting them to go on the same journey, it becomes just trying to be more powerful, trying to be dominant. Anytime you do it with an institution like a school.
Yeah, I agree. I found that quote that we were talking about earlier about the elite. The quote is, "This country needs an elite that cares more for honor than for advantage."
Yeah.
But just going back to, this country needs an elite. No, it doesn't.
Bothersome.
But that is the mindset of everybody at this school, that this country needs an elite. We are it. And so since we are it, we need to care about honor instead of advantage. But we also need to maintain our status, because the country needs an elite. And if we're not the elite, someone else will be. And that's no good. And so, yeah, just the concept of majority. What does majority have to mean? Elite? And if it doesn't, how can you reconcile the two? And also, how can we recognize like power and knowledge? One of my other takeaways was just that these people know so much about the Bible. Like they're in chapel all the time. They're learning all these things, and that means nothing to their day-to-day life, because when push comes to shove, you can't enact it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to consider also. Like when we are, as believers, it's not enough to know the Bible. It's not enough to know who Jesus is. Like we need to have a deep relationship with him. We need to have a deep relationship with the scriptures, where we're constantly learning new things and we're putting things into practice. Because anything else is not enough. It's just nominal, and we don't want that.
Right. Yeah. And you see that in these boys' lives. Like even when the dean says like, yeah, you got to be the elite that care more about honor instead of advantage. Like, one, bad that he's like, he can't even fathom that it wouldn't be about being elite, but also even worse, I'm sure that flew right over those boys' heads. Like they didn't care about, whatever. Yeah, honor, whatever. But we're going to go and do our thing and just get into the good school and get the good job and be rich and be powerful.
Yeah, because their whole life they've been the elite. Why would they know the experience of anything else? Why would they even consider that?
Yeah.
On a certain level, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, exactly. And that's why it's, I think again, nuance is like, they're kids. Like what?
Mm-hmm.
It's awful that we get trapped in these cycles of prejudice and ways of seeing the world that aren't loving, that do not reflect the ways of Jesus, that don't look at people who are different from us and see them with compassion and empathy and actually true Christ-like love.
Yeah. Well, to kind of end not on a bummer, I do think that this movie is funny. And I do think it's maybe not funny as a whole, but I do think there are funny moments. And there are, I think, just from my experience of like, I'm reading this book about Jewish comedy and then like watching this and like A Real Pain just kind of came out and won awards and like
movie.
Watching that, seeing Jewish comedy, like David is very witty. He's very funny. And that is a sign of his intelligence. And I think the movie does a good job of playing on David's really smart, but we're not really going to show you that he's smart in school. Like we'll give you here or there, but he's quick and he's funny and he knows he does what it takes to survive and he makes people like him with his humor. And I think that that's cool. I thought that was a really cool way to kind of display his Judaism, but also that he was a smart kid.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's true. He's great with like the comebacks and smooth talking to Sally, and he's clearly very intelligent. And I will throw in one other thing that is not so much a bummer, but it's set in the 50s and it looks like the 50s, at least as far as I know, and I like that. It's cool. All the funny little quirks of it, like Sally is like smoking at the diner, and it's like, oh my gosh, but like everybody smoked back then. That was the thing to do. And it's. I really enjoyed this movie. Thank you for recommending it. Thank you for being our first guest. And this is just a great conversation to have with you.
Absolutely. Anytime. I love talking about movies. We'd be doing this anyways. So
yeah,
this is great.
Yeah. And this is like I think we've said this before. It's just an excuse to talk about movies with my friends. So, I'm certain we'll have you back on in the future, which will, have some ideas. Maybe we'll recommend one to you. Something. Oh, please. Something wild. Please. Something really wild.
Okay. Maybe I take back my please. Not too wild.
Not too wild. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. But in the meantime, as for the audience, may you find a community of people to enjoy and experience and appreciate art with. May the experience of appreciating that art reveal more to you about the character of God the Father. Pray that Jesus shows you his love through a piece of art. And pray that the Holy Spirit stirs in you and kind of shows you what maybe your next step in following Jesus might be through a piece of art. And just, I hope you're blessed by this and have people to, and again, I think that's the most important part is enjoying it with people who can be the voice of Jesus to you in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree.
Anything else to add before we sign off, Faith?
Read books that you don't agree with. Watch movies that you don't agree with. Put yourself in a position so that you're not like the boys in this movie where you have no other experiences. Read stuff that you don't agree with. And then, like Tucker said, talk to your friends about it. Find people around you that can edify you and challenge you, and all those things it's going to make you a better Christ follower, which is the goal. But also, it's going to make you a better art appreciator, and that's what this is for. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again so much, Faith, for being here. Our episodes keep getting longer, and I wonder what we're going to max out at. Hopefully, we'll get that under control. You can cut
whatever you need to from me. My feelings won't be hurt.
I think
nothing funny though.
I think we're
don't cut any of my
fun. Okay, I think we're literally just going to put the intro and outro music on it and be done. But so all of your thoughts will be out there. Oh, I just saw the scene where David we have like 30 seconds left. David was in the rain and he screams cowards. It's amazing.
Crazy.
Incredible.
Go watch this movie.
Incredible power move. Yeah, watch the movie. Thank you for being here, Faith.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Go enjoy the movie.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye. She just waved. She didn't. I was hoping she would say bye. Say bye.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what. This is not mine. This is yours. You didn't tell me what to do.
Sorry, they're not watching you. Say bye, please.
I'm waiting. Bye. Bye.
Okay, she's saying bye. Bye.